Hello and welcome to another episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. I am so excited to be back after a few weeks vacation. And last week we had the episode of the two of the four owners of the High Priestess Pole Studio. And hopefully you learned, something from, women entrepreneurs opening their business, trying to remove stigma around pole dance and, how it can empower women, all that good stuff. And now as I go into August, my theme is more around getting back to school, that mindset, education, and I'm super excited. I have really wonderful guests planned for the month ahead. I know I say that every week, but I do find that there's so many wonderful people to talk to, especially women, that I do feel that way every week. And this week, I will tell you, I'm super honored. My guest is someone who I know she has a very busy schedule. So I'm so honored that she has time to talk with me today and that she can share with you some great insight. So I have with me Dr. Katie Leonard from Johnson College. And I want to tell you real briefly for those of you who aren't familiar, and maybe you're not, if you're not from Northeastern Pennsylvania or you're not from the East Coast, you may not be familiar. Johnson College was actually started by a wealthy coal baron, Orlando Johnson, and from his money, he passed away in 1912. And I always remember, because I'm a Scranton girl, born and raised, live in North Scranton, not even maybe a mile from the school, that it was thought of as the trade school. And then it became the Institute of Technology. And then you thought of technology. And now it's called Johnson College. So it's more encompassing, a lot more programs offered. And so today I want to focus on really the role of getting more women involved in trades. And I'll be honest, I've often joked with friends, I wish I had the stamina to go back and become a welder, because they do really well and they sure as hell make more money than I do. But anyway, I really am excited to introduce Dr. Katie Leonard. So welcome, Dr. Leonard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Janine. I'm so happy to be here.
So before we get into the real, I don't want to say more serious stuff, but the meat of it, why don't you tell my listeners just a little bit about you? I will say I got to see you speak at the Scranton Chamber has a women's conference every year, which I think is fabulous. At Kalahari in April, they had it this year, and I got to see one of your session. And I have to say, I love Dr. Leonard's style. I'm not trying to kiss up, but you were like talking about rock and roll, and you had your T-shirt, and I like that you weren't like, you made us feel comfortable is what I want to say. So I appreciated that style of your presentation, but why don't you share just a little maybe about your background and some things about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm from New York originally, and I came to Pennsylvania to go to college down in York, Pennsylvania, about 3 hours south from Scranton. And I never left, and I knew I wasn't going to leave. I didn't want to go back to the traffic in New York. So I really had no idea what I wanted to do as I was growing up. Where the rock and roll comes in is I was always into rock music. I thought I wanted to manage rock bands and go to NYU and, get the internship at MTV and all of that. And my dad sat me down one day and said, well, what do you want to major in? And I was like, well, I don't know. I like to read. I like to write. Maybe I'll just major in English. And he's like, well, you really can't go to NYU for that much money and major in English. She had that big reality check early on. So he knew of York College through a friend of his. And all I knew about York at the time was a rock reference. I knew the rock bands live was from York. So I was like, well, okay, I'll check York out. And I went for a visit and I loved it. And while I applied to some other schools, it ended up being the only place I wanted to go. So I went to school there and ended up living there for about 9 years before moving up to this area. And I gained experience in economic development, in marketing and PR and, community relations. I think the wonderful thing about a smaller town, whether it's York or Scranton, I think when you're younger, there's opportunities presented to you that I know that I wouldn't have had back in New York. So I was, chief of staff, in my 20s to a state representative. I was executive director of a nonprofit at 26 years of age. And just those kinds of rich experiences that just helped shape my career. Like I said, I don't think I would have gotten that had I gone back to New York. So moved up here with my, then husband at the time. He was from this area. I had a daughter and she's 13 now. It's hard to believe.
Wow.
I know. Yeah. But I've been at Johnson College. I applied for a marketing and fundraising position and got to know my predecessor really well, Dr. Ann Popinski. I still consider her a great friend and mentor. And I just did more and more with her strategic planning and fundraising, and we rebranded the institution. Again, just wonderful, wonderful experiences for my career. And when she was getting ready to retire 4+ years ago, she said, this could be your moment. It's like, you should think about applying for the presidency. And if you had told that teenager back in New York that wanted to manage rock bands that she would even think about applying to be the president and CEO of a college, I would have been like, you're nuts. But here I was, and I was getting, I had got my master's and I was in the process of getting my doctorate, and I love it at Johnson College so much. And I thought, well, when else am I going to have this kind of opportunity to lead a place that I care about as much as I care about Johnson College? So I went through the search process, which was very difficult. Some people think being the internal candidate is easier. I beg to differ. But it's strengthened, who I am and my resolve and my love and care for this place. And I went through the national search process, and the search committee selected me, and I've been president and CEO now for 4 years.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's great. And before we get into Johnson College, and I want to talk about that and about, the role of getting more women into traditionally, male roles. You talk about the idea back then, maybe getting, the MTV kind of thing. I will say, has anyone told you kind of resemble Martha Quinn a little bit?
Oh my gosh, yes. Somebody else, yes.
I can see that. So I could see you as a VJ. But before we get to the serious stuff, let me do another lighthearted question. I don't always ask this, but we were kind of bantering beforehand. Well, on the weekends when you're uncorking and you're relaxing, what do you like to uncork? What do you like to do for fun, especially now in the summer? I'll personally tell you, I can't stand the heat, but what have you been doing to kind of chill out for the summer?
No. So I recently moved, and where I'm at, that we have a pool. So my daughter and I are spending a lot of time at the pool, but we've also spent a lot of time going to concerts on the other side of COVID. So I've been back to see a lot of my favorite bands over this past year. My daughter got to see 2 of her favorites this summer, Justin Bieber, and we just saw The Weeknd.
Whoa.
So yes, but I do. And of course I do enjoy wine and beer and whiskey.
Hey, those are all 3 good ones. Only because I'm more of a wine girl. Do you have a preference? Like, I'm a white wine gal. Do you like any certain kind of wine?
So for white, I prefer Riesling, and for red, I enjoy a good Pinot Noir.
Okay, those are 2 good choices. And I have to ask, which concerts did you get to see that were really for you?
Oh, so I have loved Breaking Benjamin forever. And I think everyone knows that the lead singer is from this area. Ben's from Wilkes-Barre, but I never got to see them live. So that was the first show that I got to see on the other side of COVID. I was so busy going to school for so many years that my concert going sort of went on hiatus for a while, but it was such a great show. I saw them in December. It was sort of an intimate show in Bethlehem, and they, got to kind of meet the band beforehand, and they did a sound check for those of us that got the VIP package. And it was just a kind of like a wonderful way to kind of get back from COVID and to see them. It was wonderful.
Oh, that's great. Last week I went to Bethel Woods and I got to see Garbage and Alanis. So I love from the 90s. That was an awesome show too.
Oh, I heard that was really good.
Yeah, just thinking back to like early 90s, just getting out of college. So that was, it's nice. It's kind of nice to have that nostalgia too. You kind of feel something special with that. So again, before we get to the Johnson College part, I do want to ask you about you've had an interesting career, a great career. I love the point you made about smaller cities, because a lot of times, I mean, everyone's different, but a lot of times, I taught for 7 years at King's, and you hear what they want to be like right off the bat going to ESPN, and that doesn't happen. I mean, not to be a negative, but you need to build up your resume. And so, like you said, you had these positions that were really impressive, and you wouldn't necessarily have gotten opportunities like that in a bigger city because there is so much competition.
Right.
So now you're president of college. And how do you feel your experience has been as a woman in academia, or your experiences overall? Have you found any barriers or obstacles that you've had to overcome?
Yeah. So to be honest, I feel like for me, it's been more my age, being a young woman. I think that like the two for me, if I look at like the kind of the course of my career, the two have sort of gone hand in hand. And also like I'm short. So men in particular tend to kind of group all of that together and say things that are a reference to my being a young little woman. You see where I'm going with this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's been more, but more just, I think, people thinking that it's still okay to say certain things. And I feel like it's been my responsibility as I've had positions that are maybe more in the public eye, just to, kind of have offsite conversations to say, the year is, 2022 or 2021, like whatever year it was. And just, times are changing, and, okay, so you speak to me that way and you feel comfortable doing it, but please don't speak to our students that way, or please don't, because it's, it may have been okay at one time, or you may have felt it was okay at one time. I'm being honest, it's not okay now. And I have to say, so most people are okay with those conversations, and some aren't. And that's, that's okay too.
Yeah, but I think it's important, like you said, some people are, some people aren't. I think the conversation is the important part, right? I think these days, I think, and I won't go off too far off track, but we're unfortunately, I feel at times too extreme, where it's like you're either on one end or the other, and most of us are really more in the middle. But if you say something, the response, like even for a silly little example with the heat, I'm not a fan, and then you see, well, would you rather snow? It's like, well, I don't think we have to go from 90 degrees to 20. I think there's I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist, but there might be some middle ground there. But the important thing, like I think you brought up, is the conversation, because sometimes people aren't aware.
Right. And I think, what I always try to keep in mind, and this is sometimes, for me, it's all practice, right? Leadership is practice, management is practice. Anything we do is practice. And I think sometimes just understanding that we all grew up differently. We all, had different experiences. All of us were told that different things growing up were okay. Growing up in New York was very different than my friends that grew up here in Pennsylvania. Just something as simple as like driving, and how everybody here can't wait to get their license. It's such a big deal. And when I moved here, I was like, wow, what is that? Because like I was like growing up figuring out, how do you get to to take the train, to take the subway, to get the taxi, to get that was more of, what I was. So just even things like that, but just always trying to approach everything with a sense of like curiosity and empathy and understanding that okay, this person has not had the same experiences as I have. So in their minds, this might be okay. And just, I've learned coming at it from that perspective, and that we all have something to learn from each other. It helps.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I know we're humans, so we're not, and
Right.
we're going through our day trying to get through what we need to get through. So we don't always have that part of our brain of like, oh, I should take a pause for a moment and realize that they don't have the same experience as me. So let's stop for a second. Yeah. But that's important. That's an important lesson. And I'm sure as a leader, that's something that is really important to your role, especially overseeing so many young lives coming in, and you get the opportunity to shape their lives for them, or help them shape them, I should say.
Yeah. And I try to equate my experience in New York to what they face sometimes, with coming here. I think they come here and think, sort of comparing some of the really big employers to maybe going to work in a big city that, sometimes you might not, that big employer might be awesome, but, you might be a better fit for a smaller to mid-size, company, because you might have more opportunities sooner rather than later. And you might, your path might look a little different than you were expecting, but you don't know where it's going to lead if you don't try. So just encouraging them to always keep an open mind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So getting into, as far as Johnson College, what Johnson College offers, I will tell you, I just did a little research, but I really wanted to talk to you about getting women involved in more predominantly what has been considered male careers. And I mean, just in a real simple little search, I found that the numbers are still kind of unfortunate. Only a
Yes.
third, it says only about a third of women are manufacturing is women, about 5% welders, female. And then I saw the one statistic was about under 4% of young women enrolled in schools that are considered, more of the trade industries, that sort of thing. So we do have a ways to go for women to break into these areas of industries, which are great opportunities. So I would ask you, so first, I know Johnson College offers more than that now. They're not just a trade school. Not that I shouldn't say just, because trades are wonderful, but Johnson offers a variety of programs. So first, if you want to just give us a brief overview of what Johnson offers, and then let's talk a little bit about getting young women more interested or more into these industries.
Sure. So when I always talk about women in, sort of what's still considered non-traditional industries, I always go back to our founder, Orlando, because I thought it was so incredible. So when you look at his documents, when he was putting his trust together and his will, he said he wanted his money to be used for a school where men and women could learn useful arts and trades. And this was back in 1912, probably even before 1912, when he put the actual documents together. So before the women had the right to vote, before, the women's rights movement, I always reflect on that and think, thank you, Orlando, first of all, for doing that and always including women. And I will say too, that our numbers still reflect, well, our population of women and our non-traditional, female dominated majors is growing. It's still on the smaller side. And as you said, the statistics are staggering, because over, close to 60% of women make up college students, and over, close to 57% make up the workforce right now. And yet, we're still underrepresented in some of these fields. So what we do is, we're starting a women in industry specific initiative. And that's focused on all of our programs, but we have everything from automotive technology, HVAC, welding. As you mentioned, we've had quite a number of women go through welding, and we have a few women in each of those programs, but we would like to see those numbers grow. So just trying to get out to more women, reach more women. But I do think, no different than anything else, women have to see other women doing these things and being successful doing them. It can't just be me standing there as president and CEO. My role is very different than a female role or, a female carpenter's role. So just trying to get more women that are in these majors to talk to other women and say, you could have a fruitful career, you could have flexibility, you can have, especially now, employers will, basically sit with you and put together kind of whatever package you want. They really want good people, and women have the skills to make up a really strong workforce.
Yeah. And so there are obviously many programs at Johnson College, not like you mentioned welding, but you have areas of healthcare, right?
Yes.
So there's a variety. The ones we're mentioning, I mentioned welders, because that is still a very small percent that's women.
Yes.
And I would imagine even HVAC, because again, you tend to see more men in those industries. What have you, so you have this new initiative. Obviously, this is something that you're hoping will increase the numbers, the enrollment. Have you seen big changes while you've been president, or any changes in this area?
Yes. Yeah, it's been slow, but I have. So for a while, when I first started, I will say, looking at the high schools, again, the perception of a 2-year technical college, it was still our students in general don't go to Johnson College. So I feel for a while, up to when we rebranded, 2011, 2012, 2013, I'll say, we were still fighting that perception. It was just we just wanted, people to just kind of erase the stigma they had about, a trade school, because we're still a college. We're still getting a valuable skill set at the end, and an associate degree, which is very valuable. So I feel the first part of my career when I started here was really focused on that. And then once we rebranded, then we started kind of specifically drilling down into some of more targeted markets, looking at our healthcare, our health services focused majors, those do tend to be female dominated. So even like on the flip side, how do we get more men to look at veterinary nursing or to look at radiologic technology or biomedical equipment technology? And then on the flip side of that, women in the trade area. So we started doing some more specific marketing on the other side of our branding, to make sure that, individuals of color were represented in our photos, women were represented in our photos, because not that we didn't do a good job of that before that, we just weren't as aware of it, because like I said, we were focused more on just kind of creating that awareness that, that what a 2-year technical college is in general. And then we dove more into the target markets.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point about the whole stigma, not just about getting more women, but students in general, because, for the longest time it was like, and maybe hopefully it is slowly changing, this idea that, oh, your kids have to go to a 4-year college. When I'll be one of the first people to say, after teaching for 7 years, I was part-time, and it's not for me. I'll admit that's why I got out of it. Not every student or not every young person belongs in a traditional college setting. And, you're taking on a lot of debt. And if it's not for you, then don't do it. And there's, why not learn a trade? And there are wonderful jobs out there. And if you want to make a very good living and try it out, like that's a wonderful way to go that maybe people need to really start considering more.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in this area, like our students we tend to draw from about a 60 to 90 mile radius from our campus here in Scranton. And a majority of our students are from this area. They want to stay in this area. They want to sort of help this area grow. So we like to say that we contribute to the brain gain and not the brain drain. And you're right. I mean, look on Indeed or even open the newspaper, the starting wages for some of these careers are incredible. I mean, we have interns making between $19 and $21 an hour, and it only goes up from there once they have their degree. And a majority of our students have more than one job offer before they even cross the stage at graduation. So we have employers competing for them. And again, employers are now looking at things like flexibility and different types of benefits, again, helping them pay for school. Many of our employers do a special stipend once a student has either completed their internship and come on full time with them, or pass their 30, 60, or 90-day review. They'll get a whole separate check to help pay down their student loan. So it's a stipend specific to what their student loan payment is. And our students come out with very little debt to begin with. So I do feel like there's more of an awareness now. You made a great point about college debt. I feel like, especially too on the other side of COVID, people are taking a harder look at what they get for that dollar and the value of the degree over the long term.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and I could say personally, like I have a bachelor's degree in journalism. I've got my master's in communications from Marywood. And for a while, because I left my quote unquote day job to do a variety of different things, I was grading for an online college that was paying $12 an hour and required a master's degree in English or equivalent. So, I mean, when you look at the payment, like the trades are really paying well. And I mean, obviously, I know that's not just the one seller. People look for quality of life, your hours, different things like that. But that is important. I mean, let's face it, we all have bills to pay, and that is important.
Yes.
So as you're looking, and you made a good point, not just about attracting more young women, but people of color and young men to areas that were more traditionally female. Why is this? If someone were to say, well, why do this? Why make this effort? Why is it important to have well-balanced, jobs or industries with people of all varieties?
Sure. So I think in general, I know, in my master's and in my doctorate, you read so much, and it's true that just diversity in general makes us all better. It'll make your company better. It makes individual performance better. I mean, there's so many articles and studies written about this, and we're firm believers of that here at Johnson College. And, again, I encourage any employer that I talk with to look at that as well. So I think, first and foremost, just from like that global perspective, just again, going back to even what we said at the beginning, practicing empathy and practicing, putting those skills to use where like we are all different. Even if we come from the same place, we're still, just by the nature of, where we were born and who our parents were and how we grew up and things that were said to us in our lifetime, just, we collect all of that, and all of it makes us who we are. And if we're open to that, we can learn so much from each other at the workplace, as fellow employees, but then, offer that to our employer, those different perspectives and different ways of doing things. Even for our own students, we try to, give them very different ways of troubleshooting different problems. And we try to give them enough of that experience while they're here over the 2 years, getting out into the community, not just about doing labs here at Johnson College, but what happens when you're thrown in a community setting, into a house that maybe has all these problems, and you're an electrical construction student. We try to get different experiences so that they're that skilled troubleshooter on the other side of it. But again, working together in teams and understanding that, like, your approach might make my approach even better. I mean, that really is like such a wonderful thing for employers.
Oh, absolutely. And also, it could also help their customers or their clients, because there are people who are coming to, let's say, a veterinary clinic or in any certain setting that maybe will connect in a certain way with a certain person versus another, it could make the experience better overall.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what would you say overall in your past, you said about 4.5 years, right, as president,
Mhm.
what would you say you're most proud of? And not necessarily just with diversity, but overall, what are you most proud of?
Um, I think there's probably two things. So we started an early college program for high school students, focused mostly on seniors, but some juniors too, because it's not for every student. It can be pretty intense. But those that maybe didn't decide early enough that they wanted to go to CTC, or didn't know what they wanted to do maybe until their senior year, they can take college level classes. And they can either earn, they can earn 1 year towards an associate degree. So if they continue on here at Johnson College, and we do have a lot of students continuing on, they then only have 1 more year after they graduate high school to complete a 2-year associate degree. And for some of our students that choose an academic certificate, which welding is one of them, we've had some students earn their academic certificate from us before they even graduate high school. So that's called our industry fast track program, and I'm very proud of that program. And then something else that we launched last fall is called RISE, Readiness and Skilled Employment. This is a partnership between Johnson College and United Neighborhood Centers, the McGowan Charitable Fund, and the Institute. And we focus on low-income individuals that are either underskilled or have no skills really in the trades, or not familiar with the trades. And they go through a very intense 9-month program. So it's not just Johnson College's curriculum, but it's a special curriculum that we worked alongside UNC to develop. So they're learning everything from life skills, financial skills, they're getting coaching, barriers are being removed. So if they don't have transportation, UNC will work with them to find them transportation. If they don't have childcare, they focus on getting childcare. So whatever the barrier is, we work with UNC to remove that barrier so they could focus on their education and gaining those skills to be productive members out in the workforce. So we're just about ready to graduate our first cohort. We had 12 start in the program. We have 11 graduating. So in just that alone, that we retained, that they persisted and just worked so hard with so many barriers through this program, and we'll be ready for employment in a month or so. I'm incredibly proud of all of their effort, of all of the faculty, of the UNC staff and the Johnson College staff that have worked together on this program. So those are probably the two things I'm most proud of.
That's wonderful. And honestly, the things you mentioned, a lot of those skills, I wish I had those in my college, in my Catholic high school and in Penn State when I went. Finance, just learning about finances and budgeting and
I
those life
know.
skills, they're so valuable to every one of us, really.
Yeah. And to be honest, when we asked the RISE students what their favorite program, like Johnson College program class was, they all mentioned the finance, the personal finance program.
Well, and when we look at, debt in America, I mean, I know some of it you could say in one way it's unavoidable if you want to live, because
Right.
we all want, but like to learn, okay, what can I truly afford without making this too painful for myself? A lot of
Right.
us never really got the background in that. And,
I
in
know.
traditional colleges, like mine was journalism degree. So like I could have taken, an elective of something and I didn't because I wasn't super interested in it. But I came out of school, even with a master's, and I'm like, I don't know about finances really well, just the basics,
No, I know. I did. Yeah, I didn't either. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. And I always tell our students, I share with our students, like, pay attention to your credit score. It's one of those things you don't even think about. But then when you want that big fancy truck, or, you want to buy your first home, I'm like, it's really important. And, sometimes they look at you like all of us, like you mentioned that, when we're all starting out, it's like, what? But yeah, it's things like that are so incredibly important to understand.
Yeah. Well, and that's wonderful. So congratulations. And that retention rate, my gosh, 11 out of 12, that's wonderful. You must be really
Yeah,
pleased with that. Yeah.
we are. Yeah. Yeah. We had a goal of 20. And so I think at first we were all a little disappointed, but as we're going through the program with any first cohort, especially a program this different and new, now looking back, we're grateful that we had a smaller group to start with.
Well, and you learn a lot, I'm sure. Like you said, the first
Yes.
cohort, you learn what can we change? What can we tweak to make this better or maybe remove or whatever to make it really valuable for the next group too.
Right.
That's
Yes.
what. So will you start up a new session or how is that going to work going forward?
Yeah, so we have our next cohort. They'll start in the fall. So we're recruiting for that right now. It's a pretty intense application process, and United Neighborhood Centers kind of runs that application process.
Well, that's great. That's absolutely wonderful. So other than anything else that you wanted to add, the only other question I wanted to ask you is what you're looking forward to or what's exciting coming up for the season ahead, because I know school will be in session the
Yeah.
end of August, I believe you get
I
started with classes.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do the last week of August. We've had record enrollment the last 3 years, and we're trending to have another year of record enrollment. So I think, again, being here at Johnson College, for almost 15 years, and like I said, finishing my fourth as president and CEO, I think it's just nice to see again that perception change. Not everybody gets to see that in their career, so I feel very fortunate that I've seen sort of the tide turn, and that we hung in there. And now I think whether it's COVID or people realizing, like we talked about earlier, that debt, from a 4-year college sometimes is just something people don't want to deal with. I think whatever the combination of things is, I think people are really starting to understand the value of a 2-year degree, especially a 2-year technical degree with the kind of skills our students kind of come out with. So I think that's the first thing. Looking forward to fall always, when like faculty and students are back, and so many students. And then this last year we launched a bunch of new programs, and we have students enrolled in all of those. So I'm excited to see how those new programs do. Programs like mechatronics, and we added a 2-year welding, fabrication, and manufacturing program, a civil design program, industrial technology, and building property management. So I'm really excited to see how the students in those newer programs do. We have some other newer programs coming up that I can't talk about quite yet. Some other new initiatives, but our Women in Industry initiative is one that we've been talking about for a while now, and we're kicking it off this fall. So again, just to give women a network, and to just make sure that they can see themselves in these careers. I'm really excited about that as well.
And what will that incorporate? Is this kind of like showing them women in these roles and getting them connected, like networking type of thing?
Yeah, so bringing all of our female students together to meet professional women that are currently out in industry working in the roles that they aspire to. So again, helping them network, helping them make those connections, linking them up to a mentor if they would like one, bringing in speakers talking about issues specific to women in the industry. So to be part educational, part networking, part social. So we're really excited about it.
That sounds wonderful. That's great. Well, is
Thank
there
you.
anything else that like we didn't talk about that you just like to, as we wrap up here, anything else that you would like to add about your experience at Johnson or anything that you think is important to include?
Yeah. So one thing, this has sort of been ingrained in who we are, but again, that connection to industry. Going back to Orlando, I like to say we're founded and grounded in industry. So all of our programs, we have program advisory committees, and I go out and meet with industry, leaders, on a regular basis, and just utilizing their knowledge to then kind of infuse our programs and what the students learn, I just feel is so valuable. And again, helps that those connections to industry help make our degree that we grant that much more valuable to students, because there's some employers around here who say, you can't produce them fast enough. And if we could only hire Johnson College graduates, we would. And I think that just speaks volumes to the relationship that we have with industry, how they help us develop our programs, and then how awesome our faculty are.
That's fantastic. And it's such a valuable point too, because let's face it, the classroom is the classroom, but it needs to have real world stuff in it because they're not going to live in the classroom, right?
That's right.
So that's a great key thing that you have those partnerships and collaborations with people in
Thank
the
you.
industry. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Thanks.
Well, I appreciate so much you taking the time to share with us today. And as I always say, I hope my listeners will just, learn a little something, maybe have a few chuckles and maybe be inspired. You never know what someone's, struggling with or thinking about trying, and maybe we could just help them, think of something in a different way. And I'm always happy to do that.
That's right. Me too. So thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to do this.
Well, thank you. Well, and that is another episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. And I am Funny Wine Girl, Janine Luby. I hope you'll keep listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. In the coming weeks, we'll have actually a really serious topic. I'll be talking with Amy Archer, who co-authored or edited a book about school shootings, which is such a daunting topic, but one that everything needs to be discussed, I believe. And then I'll be talking with Valerie from Lesson Alive, which is online education platform. So super excited for the weeks ahead. As always, I love to share my guests with you. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.